Okay, I think we're gonna start. Thank you all for joining us. This is the Jeff Harnar Awards 2023 Jury Roundtable. We're here at the New Mexico School for the Arts. We are in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and it's a very special moment because we actually have the architect who designed a lot of this space with us. So he's gonna get to talk a little bit about the building too.
Yeah.
That's why we invited him. I'm Robert. I am Robert Gonzalez. I'm the Dean of the School of Architecture and Planning at UNM. It's an honor to have all our jurors here. I think all of them are here. Some are here in person, some are on Zoom. And I am now going to turn it over to Tony Fettis, who is an assistant professor of landscape architecture, who has been directing this since I arrived. And I want to also thank Rachel Jump, who is the administrative assistant to the dean and also oversees and helps with all of our award programs. We have another award program. And also Keith Greer is here. He is our development officer, here to take your money. That's why we're really here. And Tony, take it away. I'm just gonna.
Thank you very much, Robert. And did you want to make any mention of Thornburg Foundation before we get started?
I'll let you do
Okay.
the whole.
All right. So thank you all for joining us tonight, this evening. The Jeff Harnar Awards are sponsored by the Thornburg Foundation, a generous donation from them. I'll talk a little bit about Jeff Harnar here in just a moment, but is there anyone here that knew Jeff Harnar that's here tonight? No.
That in the Zoom area.
Oh, anyone
In
on Zoom?
Zoom land, is there anyone that knew Jeff Harnar that's online?
Roger?
Maybe, so, yeah. All right,
Can
Well-
we hear them if they talk?
yeah, here we go. You can advance the next slide too, so. Ready. So just a little bit about Jeff Harnar. Jeff Harnar was an architect. His designs have stood as a beacon of architectural creativity and experimental spirit in Santa Fe from his early practice in 1984 until his untimely passing in 2006. Jeff Harnar was raised in Albuquerque, and he earned his bachelor's degree from Arizona State University in 1977, and he ran a residential design and construction business until opening a Santa Fe office. Jeff worked fairly organically, synthesizing material, cultural, and environmental resources into an architecture of his time. Jeff was impressed. Jeff created an impressive body of work and was furiously creating contemporary buildings here in Santa Fe with a degree of risk and extreme creativity. This award, the Jeff Harnar Award, inspires and honors designers with Jeff Harnar's exploratory spirit and his skill at guiding clients who followed his path. So that was a lot of, throughout the history of this award. You can click to the next slide, please. As a part of how the award has been founded, and tonight we're going through a conversation with the jury here for deliberating the awards, where we're going to talk about a few of these things about creativity and regional design and just this exploratory spirit, which, this year, at least from some of the projects that I've seen, there were some really interesting and very creative takes on regional architecture. So next slide, please. So the Jeff Harnar Award started in 2007, and for many years, it was just exclusively an award for contemporary architecture. In 2018, this award expanded to explore unbuilt architecture and landscape architecture as well. And these were both professional awards that are still carried on today. And in 2021, the award expanded to feature student work of architecture and landscape architecture. We also have been experimenting with a few other categories, but this continues to be an evolution. And this year we asked the jurors if they had any nominees for projects that had a specific focus on social justice in a creative way. So, next slide. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce the jury, but I would like each of the jurors to introduce themselves as well. So we have, and I'll just go through who's up on the screen here first, and then we'll have Ted explain a little bit more, and then Alexander introduce yourself as well. So Ted Plato, principal and founder of Lake Plato Architects, is joining us, and he will be delivering the keynote speech or lecture tomorrow night. And then we have Alexandra Yashka, sorry about that, from UT Austin, who's joining us. Reed Proloff, unfortunately, was unable to participate this year, but nonetheless, we'll definitely consider him in the future. So, but Ted, would you like to give a brief introduction on yourself and also tell us a little bit about your network?
Yeah. Good point. Well, if you come to the talk, you'll hear a lot of things tomorrow. So I don't want to, come to the talk. So, other than, we've been doing our practice for 40 years, and here in San Antonio, Austin, and I started as a partnership with my partner David Blake. And so it's always been a partnership, so it's a very collaborative place. So now it's a larger office, but still embraces this philosophy that architecture ought to be particular to this place. And we get to, it started out as small houses, and now we get to do work all kinds of scale, but with that thread of making things particular to their place and working with the environment is the, so we do universities and schools, and so this was a project that we were that was very exciting to get to do because it's all part of the rail yard. It was an opportunity to take this incredible program, which is School for the Arts, which is a pretty rare opportunity, and to get it into a place like this. It was a hard scrabble condition. There was that old year. Probably all know this building pretty well, so I'm already telling you probably know about it, right? Than I did then. I think you do. So, well, anyway, it was because it was part of the rail yards, it was a lumber yard, and so lumber yards often. This is amazingly enough the second lumber yard that we have worked on, and one of the things we learned from the first lumber yard that we worked on is when people are building their own buildings and they have access to all this great wood, they do it as cheaply as they possibly can. And they span distances that, that defy any structural engineer's idea of a span, because they want to sell their 2x4s. They don't want to put them up. So anyway, the point was, it was kind of a rambling shed-like structure. And then it became, my memory was, it was a shopping center, which a lot of you know, and that was a great bookstore there. So we had one wonderful old building that I guess was the original office to the lumber yard, and then kind of a hodgepodge of things. So it was an interesting challenge to, you want to save and reuse what you could. So that's what we did. And then it had multiple levels because it was, for whatever reason, it had multiple levels. And so that was an interesting challenge to play with that. So, and this was a new piece. And I wasn't involved in the so that you can ask questions after that, or you guys can tell me more about the building. But anyway, it was really mainly just getting to work in this important district, which has been, from my standpoint, a game changer for Santa Fe, the rail yard, and the feeling of having, industrial architecture amongst, to contrast with, the historic nature of the city. And so it's fitting that we're having this jury about contemporary architecture here in the most contemporary part of Santa Fe. So long spiel. So now you get to take longer than that. Oh, that's right.
Sure.
You're next to Alexander.
Well, yes, my name is Alexandra Yeshka. I have not designed or built buildings in Santa Fe, so I can't talk about that. But I am an assistant professor at UT at Austin, and I come back to New Mexico very often because it's probably my favorite state. So I feel really honored to be on this jury. And my work is focused on environmental issues, on sustainability, and mainly I've been studying how sustainability or our approach to sustainability and the environment is shaped by influences, dynamics that are external to our fields, such as financial speculation, but also things that are internal, but architects often consider kind of external, like building regulations. So those are things I'm very interested in, but also philosophical and cultural aspects of sustainability. Yes, and I practiced in Sicily and Italy for a number of years, doing the actual sites to do my PhDs. Thank you for having me.
I also want to add that Alexandra won a very prestigious award, much bigger than this one, the GSD's Wheelwright Award, which is $100,000 to travel and do whatever you want for a year. And can you just tell us a little bit about that project? Because it was
Yeah, of
quite
course,
fascinating.
Yeah. So yes, I was the fortunate winner in 2019, and I traveled to 6 different countries studying greenhouses. Again, as really a way to think about how we relate to the environment. So the greenhouse became more of a metaphor and a model for thinking about how certain processes, certain dynamics get isolated and managed in a very kind of closed system as opposed to an open and symbiotic way with the environment. So that became more of a kind of philosophical reflection as opposed to a study of a typology. And I just finished it last year, so I'm working on this now, turning it into potentially a documentary and a book. Thank you.
Hit the next slide, next set of jurors. Yeah. So next I'm going to introduce the jurors for the Professional Unbuilt Architecture and Unbuilt Landscape Architecture Awards. Jennifer Siegel is joining us from the Office of Mobile Design and also USC. Carlos Jimenez from Rice University and Gabriel Diaz Montemayor. So Jennifer, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello, welcome to us all for being here. It's a pleasure, it's such a gift to be in New Mexico. It is one of, I think, my favorite places to dwell in the desert. So I feel very fortunate to be here at Robert's bequest and with these incredible co-jurors. My work, I'm based in Los Angeles and I teach at USC in the School of Architecture, being one of the more senior female faculty at this moment in my practice. I teach typically comprehensive studios now, so less about conceptual and more about things that are actually coming together, which I find fascinating. So, just the systems and the structure and all of the, the regulations and the pieces that really affect architecture are becoming more at the forefront of my own interest. My company, Office of Mobile Design, was founded in 1998 with an interest in off-site construction and new ways of thinking about materials and infrastructure. I've evolved more into modular and panelized systems over the years, and mostly my main interest right now is in off-grid systems and how those are being embedded within the work that I do. So we are on the cusp of launching one of the world, or possibly the world's first 100% off-the-grid modular home, which includes the water, waste, and power. So it's pretty, yes. Where I really think, the future of what we do has everything to do with infrastructure, especially with the rains and the fires and all of the impacts of nature, and how are we going to survive? So I'm still remain really curious and hope to have solutions to offer.
Well, when somebody needs to do that in.
Can I do it?
Which one is that? Sorry, OCD.
Was it? No. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? I speak very low.
Good acoustics. We tried, yes. This is my test. I told them if we could hear Carlos.
Well, it's a pleasure being here. Actually, this is my second or third. I think after 3 years strikes out.
Yeah, we kick you out.
Anyway, I'm enjoying being back in both London and Trenton, so it's a pleasure, and also to see Margaret, who's always a kind friend, a colleague, and obviously the group here as well. But I realized Ted and I haven't seen him in a while, and we were reminiscent that we started our offices at the same time in 1982. So I can say that I'm also a 40-year-old, whatever, practitioner, teacher, and it's amazing when we're just chatting about how we know where the time went. And the beautiful thing about architecture is that the evidence of that time remains in the buildings that we do, and students that are able to be privileged to teach and for events like this. So I feel very content to teach that 40-year-old art line. I hope they're further decades if we're fortunate. But really, it's a pleasure to be here and share some insights. And I primarily divide my time between teaching and doing my works. And more, I try to do less work because I have so much more work to do. And it has nothing to do necessarily with building. Sometimes it's about writing, sometimes it's about traveling or being in places like this. But we have built and continue to build whoever knocked that door. So that's pretty much it. Thank
Can you
you.
tell us a little bit about your life at Rice University in Houston?
Oh, yes. Yes. Well, Rice Rice University, and I don't want to brag, I hope I'm not misinterpreted, but I have been to many, many schools of architecture across the world, really, and I've been always fascinated by, when I come back to Rice and I realize what an amazing school it is, because it's so small. It's a kind of amazing place, because that size guarantees a kind of desire to be there. So the students that we get are really committed and very intense. And so we're only 180 students, basically. And I'm amazed that every year we get hundreds of applications to only 30 freshmen. And that makes it extraordinary. And I say that because it's really a great privilege to teach there. And I feel very honored now for 30-something years of being there. And it's a school that it's the smallest of all the academies, right? It's a small university, like Trinity, San Antonio, others, private schools, but it's the school is the smallest, but they don't know what to do with us because the whole university is research, and they're always asking, what do you do for research? I say, well, we build things and we research materials and we care about the environment. But it's if you have a son or daughter, please let me know what we have to do. Welcome to the seat or whatever I can do. It's a tough place. I wouldn't be able to get in there myself. I hope I don't know what to say about the school because I'm obviously biased. But
Thank you.
Thank you. Gabriel?
Yes, hello, my name is Gabriel Mayor. I'm an assistant dean for diversity, equity, and inclusion, also professor of architecture.
Maybe be a little louder, just
Okay, yes. Should I start over or? No? Gabriel Montemayor, Assistant Dean for Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, and Associate Professor of Landscape Architecture at the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design at the University of Arkansas. Here for the second time in a row, 1 year ago. Of all my life, literally, and I've spent 30 years in Chihuahua, the state of Chihuahua, but then I spent some years at Arizona State University, then some years at UT Austin as well, and now this is my first time outside of the arid region of North America. I was trained as an architect in Mexico and started teaching architecture in Mexico, but then when I moved here to the US, I transitioned to landscape architecture, which is what I do, what I teach, what I research, what I practice. I have a focus on the US-Mexico border region, researching the multi-scalar opportunities for integrated infrastructural systems focused on binational water management, issues related to social ecological opportunities in the US-Mexico border region, which coincides with the arid region that we are in. And I also concentrate in Latin American landscapes in general, looking at, in particular, the development of the profession of landscape architecture in Latin America, and which is also something that I teach. I used to start teaching at UT Austin and I teach at the University of Arkansas.
Thank you. And then lastly is the next slide is the jury for the student awards, student architecture and landscape architecture. We're joined today by Renee Davids from UC Berkeley and Fritz Steiner from the University of Pennsylvania. And I believe Mary Harton was unable to attend today, but she was also a juror. But Renee, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. I thanks for the invitation once again. I'm really pleased to be at least virtual.
Nope, you're muted somehow.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm extremely pleased to be in New Mexico, at least virtually. I taught at New Mexico for 2 years as a visiting assistant professor, and I remember those 2 years as some of the best years of my life. It's an incredibly beautiful state and unbelievably interesting, and thanks for Robert to invite me once again to be part of the jury. It's been a great pleasure, and it's my third time. I have a small practice, and I also teach at UC Berkeley. I write and design. My writing has been on topography and cities in Latin America. And my teaching focuses on architecture and urban design. Mostly, I do housing seminars and also a seminar on landscape. So a lot of it has come from my inspiration from those 2 years. It was an unbelievable time for me. And unfortunately, a lot of the friends I made in New Mexico have moved along or to another world. So I I'm sorry to say I have lost some of the links, but it was a fabulous time to be there, and I feel nostalgic. Then, Robert, is that enough?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Fritz, would you
Thank-
like to? So,
Yes, I'm very sorry I can't be there because last year was really a joy to visit New Mexico. Much to the horror of my development team, I'm teaching a studio this semester, so I'm with my been with my students several afternoons a week, so I can't leave. I feel a bit nostalgic too. It's like all my exes are from Texas. I mean, Reed and Ted and Robert, of course, are all UT graduates, UT Austin graduates, and Alexandra, who I have not met, is teaches on the faculty there, and Gabrielle and I were on the faculty at UT together. And Carlos, even though he's at Rice, was sort of an honorary UT Austin faculty member or visitor, frequent visitor too. So there's a big confluence of Austin connections. It's University of Pennsylvania in some ways is similar to UT Austin, where I spent 15 years. In terms of disciplines, we're more a graduate program, whereas UT Austin was split undergraduates and graduate students. Similar mix of disciplines, architecture, landscape architecture, city planning, historic preservation. The one thing that does distinguish us from several of our other schools like us is we also have fine arts. I mean, we never completely left the Beaux-Arts. I mean, we tried many times in many different ways, but the fine arts are still with us, and you know, that's pretty cool actually. So when I'm not administering programs, I fit somewhere between. Mostly, I've been a landscape architecture educator, but my most of my degrees are in city planning. So I fit in the ecotone somewhere between those two fields, and sort of fancy myself as an amateur architectural historian. Is that enough, Robert?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
great. Well, thank you all for introducing yourselves. Oh, one more.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
Roger, no.
No. Roger can introduce himself. So the other juror for the Student One Award was Mary Harden from the University of Arizona. She was able to participate in the deliberation, but was unable to attend tonight. So what I think would be a great place to start is, I know that the two jurors that are joining us for the Student Award were also the jurors last year. And what I'd like to do is just go through those jurors who participated in this award before and get your impressions on, you know, have the entries evolved or changed this year? Are there new things that you've learned from being in the jury multiple years? So starting with Renee and Fritz, what have you seen this year, and is it different than last year? Have things have entrants got stronger in terms of the quality, in terms of their approach? Anything that you've
I think Fritz and I felt the landscape entries this year, right, Fritz, were much stronger than in the two previous years, in fact. At the same time, we felt the architecture entries were slightly weaker. So it was a little strange, but in some ways really rewarding. Whenever one thinks of New Mexico, the landscape comes to the forefront. It's such a powerful sort of scene that you know, to intervene in it is really important and a very sensitive sort of subject. So I felt I mean, if just because the architecture was a little weaker, it didn't really bother me. I was really excited about the landscape entries being strong. So I don't know. That's all I can say, I think, at the moment.
I would largely concur. I thought there were several really good architecture entries as well. But the landscape architecture ones there were more of them and they were better. And last year I would say the landscape architecture ones were strong on analysis, but not as strong in design. And this year there were projects that went more into, still very strong analytically, in terms of design interventions.
Nope, we might be losing you.
I still, one of the things, shall I take over?
Fritz is,
Other thing was,
oh, there we go. Oh,
so you did have
uh-oh, yep.
agreement.
I think the connection went. Yeah, oh, now he's gone. All right. He'll restart, yeah, so, all right. So yeah, it was interesting this year for the awards. And since we've been using the application system, we did decide to do just a very small fee for the student awards. And I was actually discussing with my students in studio yesterday, and they said they were absolutely fine with a small fee because they were saying how expensive so many other awards are to actually apply for. And that, you know, just a fee of like $20 is just enough to make you think, did I do good enough on this project? And I'm like, oh yeah, I could throw $20 to that. So I think that worked out interestingly. And also we did open up the student awards to also incorporate student projects from the Mojave Desert regions of Nevada and California, and also Chihuahuan Desert areas of Texas. We did not receive any entries from Texas, but we did receive a couple entries from UNLV students as well. Yes, go ahead, Brittany.
I wonder whether Mary Hardin, which was the third juror with us, she mentioned the students next year to participate, which made me think that maybe the outreach is still not good enough. And one idea might be to approach design instructors very directly, asking them to sort of submit in the Southwest, asking them directly to submit or ask the students to submit to the program. It seems, I know Mary's students do amazing work actually, and it's a real pity that, people like that are not encouraging their students to, and it's just, she didn't know or she didn't realize. I mean, it's certainly, so maybe there's a different way, more personal way in which you could approach. It might be a lot of work, I don't know, but it seemed like maybe that would be a good thing to do.
I know that did come up in conversation in our group, and yeah, I think the time to do that would be immediately as soon as we finish this year. So then that the studio professors would know to start thinking about this over the summer, and then potentially deploy those for fall semester. So, but I think that's a really fantastic suggestion, and I definitely, that's something we should look into. So thank you, Renee. So, all right, Fritz, it looks like you're frozen again, but you're back. Was there anything that you additionally wanted to contribute?
I don't know for sure when I was frozen, but I did want to point out that both the architecture and landscape architecture student entries a lot of emphasis on environment and also social.
You can turn off this camera.
There was a real, looks like I'm frozen again.
Yeah, maybe switch off your camera and then that might preserve the audio if your bandwidth is low. There we go. There we go. Fritz, can you still hear us? All right, you might be gone again. So, all right. I think that's a good point.
Still hear you. I can still hear it.
It's only running video that really on them.
Yes. All right. I think with just with the video off, it might save the bandwidth. So please go ahead. Let's try that.
Okay. And I just wanted to point out that among both the architecture and the landscape architecture student entries, there was a lot of knowledge and interest in environmental and social factors. So there's a high level of interest in making the world a better place.
I think Roger asked the people speak up.
Yeah. All right.
Difficult to hear.
All right.
There went my name.
Okay, so I want to ask the same question for Carlos and Gabriel. You know, what you saw this year in terms of the numbers, and I know we also did ask you to take a look at some of the other entries in the contemporary architecture award. So that was kind of expanding that a little bit. And I know that you both also assisted with another award that we were looking at for a jury selection for social and environmental justice. So any thoughts that you guys have from your deliberations?
Jennifer was also.
Yeah. And,
Jennifer was
yeah.
also.
I was also looking to get your perspective this year.
Okay.
All right,
Oh,
from
last
previous
year.
years, and then Jennifer as someone new coming to the program. So, yeah.
At least, since this is my third participation, I certainly notice a higher degree of quality and development. And I think the fact that, you know, even the winners from last year already raised the bar. And I think this year, from what we saw, there was a very well developed set of works that represent the participants. So I was delighted to see that. So I can speak from just seeing it to years. That outgoes well for the council. Let's see what the public thinks tomorrow. Yeah, we have to make that choice.
Well, yeah, I think it was already commented how when you think about New Mexico and the four corner states and then the Southwest is a very kind of immediate inclination to talk about landscape. And in the case of unbuilt projects, to me, very interesting unfolding is how the being unbuilt, how not just the narrative, but the representation of, in particular, landscapes, you know, architecture as a vehicle to integrate landscape and vice versa. It's becoming a little bit more foregrounded, I think, probably also because of the mastery of tools, the digital tools or new tools, maybe, right? to be a little bit more precise and expressive on landscape and architecture and vice versa, as I mentioned. I think there is, of course, in that regard, a more explicit and effective representation, for example, with regards to phenology, seasonality, which of course has to do with these things. That to me is a very interesting thing to look at, both as a part of a member of the jury, but also as a professor of landscape architecture, how that is becoming a more structural part of the on-build projects.
And Jennifer, being new to this process, I'm very curious what your initial impressions are.
I was pleasantly surprised at the jump in scale of the submissions. I mean, we looked at some extreme urban conditions and then some sort of minuscule, I guess, dwellings. So the variety was pretty interesting, and then, you know, what Carlos and Gabriela are saying, I would definitely agree with the relationship between the material palette that's found, you know, within the growth structure and how that was folded into the material of the built form was very successful.
The one thing I think that what we noticed was the fact that this idea of the seasons that you mentioned were very much in evidence, you know, like, so you know that in fact Colorado now is entering participation because we can tell it's Colorado landscape, and they give the effort to illustrate not only what we associate with Colorado, but also seasonal changes. And so it was refreshing for us to see also that the landscape of the arid states now was being aided by a cooler breeze of Colorado.
Breezing into the mountains.
So it's
Yeah.
great to see that. And it was very, for us, it was very refreshing to see that. That the scale was absolutely, we got to see quite a few projects because we participated in.
Got the other one, yes, as well. Yeah, so the relationship, I mean, yeah, between the building structures themselves and the landscapes, that's one of the things that I was noticing as well. And you know, just taking a look at all of these. And then preparing everything for tomorrow is a very strong relationship between us. Thank you. And then to the contemporary architecture jury. So Alexandra, you were actually on the student jury. Yeah. So what was it like transitioning from the student work to taking a look at the contemporary, the big products?
I think it was very different. I didn't immediately make that connection. I didn't even think about it because I also observed last year in the student work that there were this vast scales that students dealt with, you know, going from urban to or landscape scale to the building scale. Of course, when you look at those build projects by practicing architects, that kind of investigation of the large scale disappears. So you immediately focus on the building, and of course the scale of the buildings was the scale of the proposals was much smaller. So I wouldn't really make any connection between the two.
Totally.
What I do see is definitely a particular interest in what you were talking about, the kind of unfolding or folding of the landscape into a project by engaging with materials. That's something that was present in many of the build projects, and I found that interesting, and it's something that, as an architect who, you know, visits New Mexico, it's something that I immediately picked up on when I first came here, as this incredible still presence of that connection between land and materials that is largely lost in most parts of this country because of standardization and the use of many synthetic materials. I know this happens, of course, here as well, but this to me was it's always a beautiful thing to see that there's a lot of effort to engage with materials that are immediately understandable to a human being as coming from land, because they're natural or quite natural, not that synthetic yet. And there is a very strong connection to landscape in many projects. Of course, more the ones that are not urban, in the way they engage with the geology and with plants. So I really enjoyed seeing some of that.
And some of the things that I was seeing too across all of the categories was that materiality, that exploration, with materials, but then also through process. There were some entries that just had really fantastic expression of their process, of how they looked at the landscape, looked at the materials, and how that all completely integrated with the landscape and whatever structural landscape that they're presenting. So, and Ted, with you, what are some of your impressions from?
Well, I just wanted to start, so a question was, so you had originally the awards program was just the contemporary architecture piece, and then you guys expanded it to students and unbuilt, but when you expanded it, you made it landscape architecture as part of that.
Correct.
Which is unusual. I mean, I don't know how many programs have landscape and architecture and that, I wasn't quite aware of that. So that's pretty interesting. And then I found it really exciting that you've expanded it now one more time to not just, more states, but particular parts of the states. I love that. I love it. If you're not in the Mojave Desert in California, you don't get to apply. Or, if you're not in the dry section of Colorado. Anyway, I really love that. I really adore that. And I adore the idea that it's unified in Mexico in the program. Very cool. That's not, I guess you chose not to do that in the contemporary stuff.
It's still Four Corner States.
I know, but you didn't make landscape as I think just, I mean, maybe because.
I'm a landscape architect, so.
What? No, we think we should do that, right? Bring it on.
Yeah, we did the unbuilt. We got the first order.
Yeah. So I would have, but I will say that the ones that I think we were probably most intrigued with were the ones that are working in both routes. Those are opportunities to, and when I say both routes, where they have a strong outdoor landscape component with the architecture, but it wasn't part of the requirement. It's just those were the stronger projects, and those were the ones that gave you a better sense of this particular wonderful place, and often it's a way, during contemporary architecture is desperately needing the landscape as well to be, especially in this remarkable place, which is so much about the outdoors. So it's kind of hard to separate those. So anyway, all I'm saying is that I think the strongest ones for me were the ones that did have landscape. But I think it'd be interesting but Jeff was probably not a landscape architect. Jeff looks like it by looking at his stuff. So, but anyway, but I think, we can keep tweaking the program. I think it's kind of fun. So, and I like the idea again of making it that the definition of where you can apply is not by state, but by, rainfall, because, there's so much less rainfall in Texas. We can start applying pretty soon. Anyway, we're like 10 inches of rain right now in a place that normally does 23. So, yeah.
I have a question for the jurors. So I think, it's obviously a legacy award. It's an award that is built around the legacy of someone who is very near and dear to the heart of the foundation's namesake, Garrett Thornburg, who founded the Garrett Thornburg Foundation. So Jeff Harnar was his best friend and his architect, his personal architect, and he passed away at an early age. So it has been an exploration of how do you balance that focus on contemporary Southwestern aesthetics and approaches with all the other things we want to explore. So one question, I guess, for the jurors would be, if you're looking at projects across scales and across a variety of landscapes, what is the sort of through line that is southwestern, or are we sort of hanging on to a term that maybe is more of a symbolic term than an actual term? Because we advertise this as a competition that explores contemporary southwestern architecture and landscape architecture. So I'm curious if the jurors, like if you could not define it, but maybe, wrap some definition around it, around the term Southwest and Southwest.
Well, the main thing is, I mean, certainly for a juror, the jury, it's fun to get to look at work that is all, dealing with some of the same challenges. So the challenges are the climate, the weather. So I think it's, and that's a challenge for the landscape, and that's a challenge for the, where the sun's coming in. Yes, and it can be brutal, it can be hot, and it's tough, and it's, so I love that we're not looking at stuff that, I mean, it's always fun to look at stuff throughout the world and the country and stuff like that, but it's really enjoyable for a juror to get to look at work that's wrestling with the same environmental conditions. That's neat. But you could add to that, if there's more than just the environmental conditions, the conditions that are in place, you have some PennDOS, and just lots of other issues that are really relevant to the Southwest. I think it'd be neat to just add those pieces in, make that this. I mean, it's all about, for us, it's all about looking at trying to encourage work that's appropriate to its place, and appropriateness is the environment, people, and culture.
Well, I just want to
Around.
play the other
Take your
side of
play.
that. The other potential side of that idea is that there was one project in particular that comes to mind that really is not about place at all, because it's, it's about manufacturing. It's about production and the future of what a material can be the way that we normally see it. And now it's becoming, more about a 3D print, let's say. And that can be applied in any location. And it seemed to hang tight, I guess, in its form in the location that it was shown in. But I could imagine it in an urban center. I could imagine it in a shopping mall. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be about place when it comes to making the manufacturing of the thing. So I thought that was.
I continue to be fascinated by the four states.
Yeah, because you could stand it before.
But I also like the symbol of.
It's nothing like having a bunch of square states.
Yeah, but you notice it also looks like a coat of arms. Like those amazing coat of arms from antiquity. It's the unity, it's a sharing of territories. I love Spain for cultural reasons, and I've always been fascinated by the fact that before there were states, there were regions, there were comunidades, regions, and they were, the Galician and the Radian and the Lucian and so on and so forth. And slowly, of course, they become the territories, they become states. But I think what fascinates me about this particular prize is that it has been expanded to relate those four states to this commonly established feeling about the landscape and really the dangers that exist in a landscape that we still often don't understand. And we must produce servers in this landscape against really the weather and the environment and so on. In a way, I think culture develops constantly by encountering place, but also how you manufacture that place, to think of Jennifer's comments, because this year I had the pleasure of taking the students to see the Alhambra, which I visited on my own, but I never visited with students, and I was fascinated to see how they were responding to how this place was made through the agency of understanding shape, understanding nuances, understanding the interiority, the warmth, the coolness of the idea of water. I mean, this fascinating building that is centuries old, but still teaches some amazing contemporary lessons. And so I think that here in this four corner space, there is amazing lessons, and some of the architects that we have seen in the journey understand that, and that's exciting for us as a larger discipline, facing the realities of a place that is arid, that's also full of storms and nevadas. How do you say nevada in English? A nevada is like a snow.
A snow slope or?
Yeah, a snowstorm. There is a state for Nevada.
Yep.
For a big-
That's where it comes from.
I thought I would have an answer in this part of the world, but I didn't see that. I'm not too far out.
Well, to throw a little bit of a wrench, one thing we also talked about last year was the idea that the Four Corner States itself is sort of a colonial lens. And that target that target could also be seen as a target. And that we can imagine all of the regions as places of inhabitation that have strong indigenous history. So one question that we grappled with has been, is the Four Corner State idea a colonialist idea that we need to move away from? And when we were expanding for just the student category, all of the other areas that we described, is there a way for us to sort of reframe as we move forward with the evolution? It's really exciting to see sort of an evolution of an award program. The other thing that I'll just throw out for the jurors is that, originally this was just a contemporary architecture award, which stuck out like a sore thumb in the world of the Thornburg Foundation, which is a foundation that has completely devoted all of its millions and millions and millions of dollars to poverty, to water scarcity, to homelessness, houselessness. It's a humanitarian foundation. And there's no indication that they even do this on their website because it just doesn't fit in. So as we've evolved the award, we've started to think about it as something that is a part of what they do. So that's why we have the social justice component, the sort of, I don't know if you all are aware that for the contemporary architecture big award of $10,000, we decided, I think my first year I got here, that we didn't want to just give a firm or whoever gets that award $10,000 so they can, pay their electric bill, but we wanted them to devote that to some kind of DEI effort. And last year was a phenomenal year for us because they gave that money right back to us, added 15,000, so it gave us a $25,000 endowment and started a scholarship specifically for sort of a DEI topic. So we're trying to sort of loop in and come back to the Thornburg Foundation's mission. Other thing, we also now have a social justice sort of project that we are going to honor this year of all of the projects. So I'm curious to see how does the Southwestern Contemporary Architectural original mission mesh with that? How did you grapple with those two things existing in the award program as you were exploring?
I can just reflect for a moment on the first part of
Yeah.
what we're saying, because it actually really resonates with something that I've been thinking about when I look at the sites, and of course those are artificial boundaries. The one thing that stands out to me in this part of the United States, and again, as a foreigner, as a European coming from a place that has perhaps a longer uninterrupted history as compared to the United States as a country, is that I come here and I feel that the sense of long time is still very perceptible in this part of the country. And that is because I feel the presence of the indigenous cultures much more present than in other parts of the United States in a very beautiful way that is perceptible. I can sense it in the land. I can sense it that is alive and it's so cultivated. And I think that it's very intangible. It's not something that one can, it's not a style thing, although in part, of course, it is expressed in stylistic or material terms. But I think if anything, if this award can cultivate that culture, the indigenous culture that crosses the boundaries of those states, and emphasize that this is actually what gives the identity to this place, and this is what I think for someone like me senses in the use of materials, in the way architects relate to the geology, to plants. To me, that's incredibly rich, and I think that's a very easy transition to then thinking about social and environmental intelligence that exists in those cultures that we should be picking up on and celebrating, and that will be a form of social justice, probably.
Right, I think that
I
in this, but
Go ahead, Renee.
no, I just wanted to say that I completely agree. And also had an interesting experience in the last few weeks because UC Berkeley has been busy with a search for 2 new assistant professors. And there were a lot of portfolios from Ivy League schools. And I was just shocked by the fact that none of them had site plans. It seemed to be completely out of fashion. And it made me think about New Mexico because I can't imagine any students there not thinking about the land and not having site plans. So I started feeling that this award was even more important than it is as a message to the rest of the American academic world. I really was shocked by I don't know how widespread it is and whether it was just the people applying to our school, but there was literally none of those portfolios, either their own work or the work of their students had site plans. And to me, I mean, one of the candidates said, oh, when I pointed it out, said, oh, that's a good idea, I should include them. But that's not how it works. I mean, if it's really important to you, then it would be in there, right? So I can only say that I think this region has something to, at this point, to teach the rest of America about, how important the culture and the landscape is for the rest of the world, not just New Mexico, but here I think it's sort of, you can't avoid it. And apparently in the rest of America you can. So that's all I have to say.
Renee, that's like the larger environmental justice mission of the award itself. Thank you. Gabriel, sorry I interrupted.
just thoughts that came to mind with regards to thinking about this awards program as defined by political and political boundaries. Makes me think that, and speaking also of what you were saying, Alexandra, you can almost run a global GIS analysis of the conditions that are starting the political boundaries of the Southwest and identify how this condition can be comparable to other locations globally. And I think in that regard, I'm not saying that you should expand it to wherever you identify similar conditions, although that would be a fantastic idea, in my opinion, right? Especially if the foundation is acting elsewhere globally. But I do think that it would really help to position the challenges that this awards program is addressing and how this actually happen elsewhere, in the rest of the Americas, in Africa, Asia, Europe, whatever it is. And of course, in that regard, it will expand into social ecological realm. It's not just that the arid regions are expanding and the desertification processes are expanding. It's also, you know, social cultural conditions are also expanding. And, probably in a way, I would say probably not as unique anymore in some ways, right? Given the actual diversification of these countries, but similar processes going on elsewhere.
Yeah, the climate refuge.
Yes.
Can I just add something that's probably very unpopular in this conversation? But I was thinking about two of my favorite writers, about J.B. Jackson and Rainer Banham, and their take on this part of the U.S. And I always think about the trailer, the kind of the most affordable version of housing, especially in New Mexico. And J.B. Jackson writes about it so eloquently, is the the mobile home. And that is the proliferation that you see when you're driving between Taos and Santa Fe. And I think there's a romanticism to this idea of like the indigenous, southwestern curve that you see out here in front of us. But the real housing, the majority of the housing are trailers, which don't have a lot to do with the place until they arrive on the place, right? And then it's maybe about the orientation, but it's manufactured somewhere else.
But if, I mean, I don't quite know.
So I'm applauding the trailer. Like,
No, for sure you're applauding the trailer. But if the trailer, and the trailer needs to, someone needs to send a trailer in next year, but the trailer is only gonna win when it has this amazing landscape around it. The trailer's sitting out, the trailer's still hovering around like it's just been airdropped, and no one loves it, and it doesn't have shade, it doesn't start to connect to the land. It's not done its job yet. So, I mean.
But you can also say that living lighter on the land, right?
No,
Like
I-
that
It's also
I'm-
an expression
No,
of social injustice.
I haven't heard of against it. I'm just trying to.
I knew I was gonna get it.
I don't know, but it's important. It's just what you can, it's not enough to just plop it. I mean, that isn't going to be, it solved an economic issue. It's an affordable way of building. It's light on the land. It's brilliant. All the other parts are smart, but it becomes a great place to live when it's finally dealing with the environmental conditions. And a lot of some of the environmental conditions, some intense sun or incredibly reflective light, just sitting right outside your door, or just a myriad of things. And so all it takes is just applying those things. And we see them all the time. You see a wonderful little trailer, and it just has a shed over the side of it. It's got a grape arbor over here, and it's got a little rustic thing over there. And it wins that year. It gets the award that year because it was so light on the land. And landscape played a big role. And so when we were encouraging landscape to be a big part of the story of this award, I want to. I'm fine to fashion stuff, but I just it's just that's that piece of where how you take the next one. But I love the idea that your awards thing at some point that goes beyond the grid line, and it has this amorphous shape that that is just a shape based on no boundaries. And I love that. I mean, what an amazing looking. I mean, people have to really study, kind of, are they over that line, and they have to apply it. Anyway, I think it's really cool looking. I think it has real potential, cool graphics where it's four corners knocked. It's got.
So I'll have to come up with a new logo. But Ted, I wish you could repeat everything you just said about the trailer, because I think we're looking at sort of a very stereotypical idea of a social, economic, moment in someone's life or in a lifestyle. But if we talked about, say, the indigenous teepee or whatever we're also talking about a temporary structure that is mobile. So I'm just curious to see, I know Jennifer, you've designed whole communities with sort of trailer building type that sort of brought to a completely different level. Weren't you doing something in the desert somewhere?
Like I love to talk about the trailer, and I look at those weathered, sort of decaying structures, and I just see this incredible beauty in them, the way that like you see that in an adobe structure that's sort of melting. And then the amount of money that it takes to kind of rebuild the adobe and keep the water away from it and, solve that problem, millions of dollars being up in, where were we today? The upper, Canyon, very expensive real estate, beautiful, but unaffordable for most people. And you look at the trailer and you're like, oh, solution.
Is it really Adobe or is it,
Those were like, no, those were adobe.
Double Adobe.
Yeah, regardless, I mean, I think the trailer is such an interesting idea. I mean, I definitely understand that it needs to be loved and elevated and, like thought about at many different levels, and it's not necessarily the way in which it's fabricated, but it's about materiality and how that gets, wrapped. And I think, the future of manufacturing is really about robotics as well, and printing, and how is all of that going to fit together. It's just such an interesting moment. I mean, the trailer park is an amazing community. It's probably the only American community that is America.
But also, what you say to quality of life for those who actually do live in the trailers, certainly they do have a sense of community, which is a wonderful aspect of quality of life. What are their air conditions? What are their what's the thermal quality? What is the quality of the acoustics in the home with the integrity of how it's built to the systems? So if we can if that can be brought to the trailer, then I think we've really, the game then really gets up. Which is probably a lot of.
Yeah, but if it's automation too, like you all have done that beautiful concrete home, right? The concrete, yes. And so again, you can actually use that to a site specificity that who's controlling where you're creating your Trombe wall, right? To create that cooling heat. And then that, gets dropped in, then it starts to weave itself into the context of it, more than just a prefabricated object that it has no design, except to create a box that has roots, exceptions. But I also love this thing you talked about, because I lived all over Texas, big cities, and this erasure that has happened, right, in time, where I can go, and I did actually travel when I was in grad school to study the cities of northern Mexico. We have 400-year-old that you can walk the street. And this became kind of just a cultural toolbox for us as to start to go from, to start to learn from, not to appropriate, but to really reconsider like how indigenous people, standard culture, et cetera, that we're living on this land for so long, gives us clues and how they manipulated their rights, right, to the benefit of food, to create habitat, shade, all these things. And I feel really blessed to be here, to be able to be this extended time warp, right, but to bring contemporary ideas to table.
I think this part of the United States can really still build on that much more than many other parts of the state, because that intelligence, land-based intelligence, seems to be still very present. And I think, it's interesting what you say about the trailer, that I often perceive as a sign of social inequity, where, of course, people who are very often underprivileged who end up living in those prefabricated trailers. And the difficulties, how can we embrace it as a sign of the American culture, but invest it with the intelligence of the indigenous ways of living that were erased by that culture, right? Because those are two kind of clashing cultures, and they need to come together. But of course, when we look at these buildings, many of them, I don't know this particular one, but it's really heartbreaking to know that most of it is a stick frame that just looks like an adobe, but it's not an adobe. So the intelligence, the climatic, in terms of thermal properties, all of that is gone. And yet, that is the power of this place, is to actually go back and recover that knowledge, as you're saying, and see whether some of it can be translated into temporary structures if we decide that temporary structures is the way to go. I think this is really important. And in a way, just to add a little thing about this layering boundaries, perhaps the way you could start rethinking the boundaries of the composition is to think about, how we think about the watershed, where instead of thinking about administrative boundaries, we say, okay, what are the watershed boundaries of a region? Well, here is the cultural watershed, right? That has a certain way, a certain intelligence that was built by the indigenous people that is expressed in a similar way by certain communities. And I'm sure you could just draw the boundaries of that based on the indigenous tribes, certain ways of using materials, certain approaches to the use of water, even ecosystems that have a certain natural boundary. And I think it will be really interesting to actually try to understand what that new boundary is and how that relates to land and the existing indigenous communities. I think that would be really not very close to some of the mission of the what's the name?
The Thornburg Foundation.
Thank
Yes.
you. Very complicated name.
Back to the drawing board, or it continues to go back to the drawing board. I know we're probably running out of time, and I just wanted to ask if there were anyone in the audience who's here who wants to ask a question of the jurors, or anyone in Zoom land. I don't know how many people are still on, because we've gone over, but if anyone wants to ask anything of our jurors, this is something we do. The jurors are getting to know each other across the jury teams, but also, tomorrow is the big reveal, so we're not revealing who the winners are. Any questions from Zoom land?
Well, Fritz left because he kept getting dropped off. And
Um,
Roger, how many entries were submitted in each category?
It was very scattered. It wasn't where we wanted to be. So I'll give you the exact numbers later, Roger, but it was around the same amount as
Private.
last year. Any other questions? Maybe on any of the topics we touched on?
I have just a question, kind of off topic.
Who's this?
This is William from UNM. I was wondering what time and where tomorrow, I believe. I heard
I see. Well,
Ted would be there.
Yeah, William, it takes place tomorrow at 5:30 in Pearl Hall. And
Okay, wonderful.
yeah, we begin with a lecture by Ted Plato, and then we will continue with the sort of the big reveal. And hopefully some of our winning firms or folks will be there and they can come and talk. And at that moment, the jurors will speak specifically about the projects and why they were chosen.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I was curious, this process, not to be jury, but, are all the submissions going to be made public? Is there an archive of
Right.
all the submissions that is made public, and not just the award?
No, we don't put them all out there or make them public. I think in the past at some point, because physical boards were submitted, back in the days of the big foam core boards, they would all arrive and then they were all displayed in the building, and we've moved now to paperless. So it's all by PDF. We do have a best of show with some selected projects that will be in the Crit Bridge area. So you'll be able to see some of them, but we don't showcase all of them.
Can I have some?
Yes.
So there's such an interesting conversation about the nature of place and places and from the mobile. And I was actually thinking about this indigenous cultures that populated this part of the world and how wise they were and how ahead of the time they were. And we are in a century, 21st century, where we don't seem to yet even understand how to place a building properly. And so it seems to me that the awe that I feel about a place like this when we encounter not so much estates, but regions, the fact that landscape shapes your sensibilities. And whether you do it in a manufacturing warehouse or you do it on the site, it seems to me that it's fundamental that we don't lose sight of that. And I was looking at the wonderful building by a well-known architect from this part of the world that was spent time in Brazil and migrated for reasons of his breeding problems. You know what I'm talking about.
Jungle.
Yes, and the first thing he did is he started to look at the sun and where to orient that marvelous building that is Los Poblanos. And it's just a marvelous building that, regardless whether you hate or dislike the architecture, I just marvel at the intelligence behind the placement of that. So I will always argue that place matters because it's not necessarily about the nostalgia of the place. It's about the fact that a place affects that simple, critical, and revolutionary idea, which is to place the building. And you know, in my city of Houston, I'm demoralized by the lack of where have we arrived as a civilization? That people place this building facing west so the air conditioning system runs 24 hours a day. And such a simple idea, such a radical idea seems to have been lost in some efficiency on the market. So I think that we have a lot to learn from this place. I mean, it's there for us to see. And I'm always in awe of this place. Not so much for the Adobe, whatever, the full Adobe or all the other stuff, but just the beauty of it. And if you look at Santa Fe in the original layout of the city, it's amazing how they laid it out. The vistas were preserved, everything, the landscape still ruled as a place. And the people that were the original mobiles, the American mobility took place here, and they were moved depending on the seasons and the beautiful things they design and build, and folded the tents, and they didn't waste things. And how much we have to do.
Well, I think on that very positive note, and the very positive note that we're not in Houston, and there. Thank you. Thank you to our jurors, for the roundtable. We're gonna now treat them to a nice dinner and Joseph's across the street. And thank you all for joining us.